APEC Summit has already started in San Francisco of the United States, but the main highlight was no other than the meeting between US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. And joining us right now from San Francisco is VOA correspondent Chris Casquejo. So the two leaders have already met today. So what has been the main topic of their discussion between the two leaders?
Well, there was one main area that the U.S. really wanted to reestablish, and that is direct communication between militaries. And the presidents both agreed that they would reestablish military communication that had gone by the wayside since China stopped responding to the U.S. calls after they were angry that Taiwan hosted then U.S. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, incidentally, who was from San Francisco. And even in his press conference, US President Joe Biden said he and she will be able to pick up the phone and call each other. Now, another takeaway is they agreed that China would go after companies that are involved in the production of precursor chemicals of fentanyl, which is a huge crisis here in the US. The abuse of fentanyl is a huge crisis here in the US.
So would you say that the meeting was a smooth sailing or was it a tough one?
It seemed to be smooth sailing. I mean, observers that were at this estate, Filoli Estate, which is about 44 kilometers south of San Francisco, said that their body language was very warm. You know, they were looking each other in the eye. They even took a stroll on the grounds. And I don't know if you're familiar with the 1980s show Dynasty, but this house is where Dynasty was filmed in the 1980s. And Biden even wished Xi's wife a happy birthday because they have the same birthday, and she returned the favor by saying that he had forgotten his wife's birthday because he had been so busy in the planning for this summit. So I mean, stuff like that shows that it's not tense, at least between the two leaders, because of course this meeting has been in the works. There have been so many diplomatic engagements over the past several months, and we finally got to this point.
And even though the political tensions between the US and China still exist, both have previously voiced hope for greater stability. So how likely is it to be achieved considering that the US has previously imposed sanctions on China?
Well, I guess it's just, we'll have to wait and see, if another US House Speaker, there is a new US House Speaker, Mike Johnson from Louisiana. If he decides he wants to visit Taiwan with lawmakers, how will China react to that? Will it surround Taiwan militarily like it did last time around? So, I mean, it's one thing to have these words and these nice pictures and agree that, you're going to have a better relationship moving forward, but it's all in how the two countries respond to events that may offend each other, like the balloon that was shot down by the U.S. military over the summer. That some considered that an extreme response at the time.
So can we say that the meeting between Biden and Xi is a fruitful discussion in a sense where they're trying not to make the relationship go worse?
Sure, I think you can have that takeaway because, like I said, it was really important for them to establish direct military communication, and the defense secretary from the U.S., Lloyd Austin, will meet with the Chinese defense minister as soon as one is named, because that position is currently vacant and it has been for the last few weeks. So yeah, we're just going to have to wait and see if these engagements continue and the conversation continues, because that is the most important thing, according to analysts and veteran U.S.-China watchers, that the dialogue continues, that they're going to have issues that they agree to disagree on, like Taiwan, but they just need to have open dialogue.
Right. And previously, there have been reports that the tensions between the United States and China may put the economic growth among APEC members in decline. Are the two leaders currently aware of this prediction?
Sure. I mean, President Xi said that this is the most consequential relationship in the world, and Biden echoed those statements. And, a lot of the business leaders that we've been coming across at APEC from the APEC countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, they say that they would really like to see a less tense relationship, so they're not forced to choose. They don't feel like they're forced to choose between the U.S. and China.
Right. And how other member economies reacting to the dynamics between the US and China? And do they foresee any impacts on regional stability?
Well, I guess it's a complicated question because you have the trade angle, and the U.S. is trying to de-risk from China. Some say it's decoupling from China and not rely on China so much to be the factory and manufacture goods, and they're trying to move production into countries like Vietnam, like Thailand, like the Philippines. So those countries stand to gain from the U.S. effort to move business and manufacturing into those countries. But also there's the security issue. The Philippines has had some very near incursions in the South China Sea near the Second Thomas Shoal recently, where the ships actually collided briefly. So it's a complicated question to answer. So there's just so much involved.
Right. And what about the US's stance on the Indo-Pacific region? How has President Biden articulated his Indo-Pacific strategy in the APEC Summit?
Well, Biden's strategy is clear. His administration calls for a free and open Indo-Pacific, freedom of navigation on the waters, which goes against China's expansive claims in the South China Sea. But Biden is also trying to engage the nations economically. There are 13 countries that are part of what's called the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, and they've been meeting in other meetings alongside APEC, to hammer out some frameworks for trade, other things, digital economy, and all types of things that are involved in trade. But it's not a free trade agreement. It is just a framework for these countries to engage economically with one another.
And what were the key policy points that have been highlighted during the APEC summit?
Well, the theme of APEC is creating a sustainable and reliable future for all. So a lot of the discussions with CEOs, with the Southeast Asian country leaders have focused on that theme and attracting businesses that will pursue sustainable models, green energy, and that sort of thing. And of course, we're in San Francisco and near Silicon Valley, which is the hub of US innovation, and many argue the hub of world innovation. So there's just a lot of interaction between world leaders, their delegations, and these business leaders of these high-tech companies.
And many countries in the Indo-Pacific region have fears that the geopolitical rivalry between the US and China might intensify and are concerned that they might be pressured to take sides. So how do world leaders foresee this at the moment?
Well, I think the reaction has been they're happy with that this engagement between the leaders of the US and China happened. And they're probably going to be very happy to hear that, they've agreed to have regular dialogue, because really that's what it's about, having open lines of communication. It's like any relationship, whether it's a personal relationship, a diplomatic relationship, you just have to be able to communicate.
Right. And now let's talk about Thailand a bit more. So what is the current sentiment from world leaders and the investors there about Thailand, especially now that Thailand has a new leader, Srettha Thavisin, who said that he wants to put Thailand back on the international radar?
Well, he has a clear goal here, and that is to attract investment from the U.S. into the Land Bridge project, the $28 billion infrastructure project that would build, a new shipping lane in the region and would be a game changer for shipping. So that's his clear goal, and it seems like he's being received very well. He was supposed to speak at the summit hall with other world leaders, and I do have a little personal story to share. He was out for prime rib on Monday night at the same restaurant that I was at, so he was enjoying one of San Francisco's classic restaurants. So it seems like he's enjoying himself.
Right, and we have noticed that Prime Minister Seta has been meeting with Tesla and other major companies there. So it seems to be a very positive discussion there, right?
Right. Like I said, I mean, this is where those leaders are based. Elon Musk, Mark Benioff of Salesforce. There was an event at Salesforce Tower, which is now the tallest building in San Francisco. So yes, I mean the opportunities are endless. You know, there are some deals being announced, but I would say that you should just check the list of companies that were involved and the world leaders were involved. And then I think in a few months, you'll be able to see investments that come from it. And it's because of the relationships that were built at a place like this where handshakes and people getting to know each other is just happening just in such a fashion that, it's multiplying.
Right. And one last question. How do you foresee the relationship between Thailand and the US as well as APEC leaders?
That's a hard question to answer because the prime minister is so new and the US has really been focused on China. But again, the US really wants to engage Thailand economically and politically because it sees it as a key partner in regional security, like other nations that are involved in this IPEF or Indo Pacific Economic Framework, that's 13 countries, in the region that are part of the larger APEC group of 21 nations.
All right. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
And right now we have CGTN correspondent Zhao Yunfei, who will also be sharing with us some insights of the APEC Summit. So the two leaders, President Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping, have already met. So from your perspective, would you say the meeting was a smooth sailing or a tough one?
Well, certainly the meeting is under certainly everything is under plan, and then it's a very smooth process going through because uh, for sure it lasted the time that it as it planned, and then the two leaders hold talks at the beginning. I believe they would have in-depth exchanges, and then after that they have lunch, and they also had a walk. So if you look at this whole series of planning, the two sides at least have sending out a positive signal that the two leaders are coming back to the table and have a conversation, despite the fact that the two countries do have many different views on many different matters, but their different perspectives didn't affect the way that the two leaders can sit down together and discuss topics perhaps that matters to uh, what is related to the core interests of the two countries as well as what's going on in the world.
So what do you think has been the biggest achievement from this discussion?
The biggest achievement is the discussion itself, because I spoke with a lot of people, especially the CEOs who are attending the CEO Summit in San Francisco, as well as some former leaders. All of them say that uh, when the two countries are facing the relationship are at strain, it's so important for the two countries' leaders to sit down together and talk. Remember the last time the two leaders talked was at this time last year was at the sidelines of G20 in Bali, Indonesia, where the two leaders over the past year, China has been echoing, saying that we should come back to the conversation in Bali because China believes that what the United States has been doing over the first half of last year was basically, doing one thing and saying another. China doesn't believe that the United States has genuine idea, and then it really conflicted with what Biden has promised of not seeking confrontation. But certainly at the second half of the year, there are more exchanges. I think more communication between the two countries, and that really paved the way for the talks today. So it's always good to talk.
And how do you foresee the relationship between the US and China after this particular meeting?
Well, a lot of the experts I spoke with is saying that it's good that the two leaders can sit down But certainly there are so many layers of different disagreement between the two countries, right? Especially China does care about how U.S. has been interacting on the matters that related to China's foreign interests, the Taiwan question, and U.S. has been unlawfully conducted uh, military actions in the Strait of Taiwan, and that really hurt China's foreign interest and also violates what the two countries have agreed upon. We signed a joint U.S.-China communique when the two countries established diplomatic ties. So certainly, not just the Taiwan question, the South China Sea issue, other geopolitics issue, as well as economically, there are so many disagreements. So it's not a very too positive signal, but what's being good is that this is the starting point of how the two countries are negotiating and working and seeking for the common ground.
And how other member economies reacting to the dynamics between US and China? And do they foresee any impacts on regional stability?
Well, speaking with the press that here at the media center during the APEC meeting, uh, the reason why the meeting between the leaders of China and the United States is so important to the media outlets, despite the fact that many media outlets are not Chinese or American, but they still pay close attention to that, is because the relationship between China and the United States is the most important bilateral relationship in the world, because that relates to the peaceful development of the world, and that also relates to how the economic development to the rest of the world. That's why the world press is watching closely on how the world's two largest economies, as well as the largest developed country and developing country, and further navigate their ties.
And there have been reports previously that the tensions between US and China may put the economic growth among APEC members in decline. Are the two leaders aware of this problem?
I have no idea whether the United States is aware of this problem, but certainly China has been aware of them. That's why China has been called for a concept at the APEC over here, a shared future for Asia Pacific. And what is a shared future? It's a common how all the countries seeking for the common grounds and abandon unilateralism and embrace multilateralism and walk each other and protect the supply chain of the Asia Pacific. I think that's the point of APEC, when the 21 economic entities, leaders of them, are sitting together and see how they can look for common ground.
All right, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of Thai PBS World Talk.